A man found a dog buried alive. And what he did next is incredible. He was just a construction foreman checking the land until he heard something, breathing under the dirt. What he uncovered wasn't just any dog. This one had haunting amber eyes, and a secret buried deeper than the grave he was left in. But when the dog's chip leads to a grieving widow from a powerful family, everything spirals. Someone wanted this animal dead, badly. And the truth? It's darker than anyone imagined. A killer hiding in plain sight. A cover-up stitched into power. Why would someone bury a dog alive? And what did the dog see the night a judge died? Your comments and presence here remind me why I tell these stories. If you still believe in the healing strength of love, truth, and quiet courage, then you're the reason this channel exists. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Bakersfield construction site as Garrett Holloway pulled up in his weathered pickup truck. The autumn air was crisp, and his breath formed small clouds as he stepped out to begin his daily site survey. 20 years in construction had taught him to always check the grounds before his crew arrived. Safety first, he always said. He walked the perimeter, clipboard in hand, when something caught his eye. The freshly graded soil looked disturbed in an area that shouldn't have been touched. Garrett frowned, his work-worn boots crunching on loose gravel as he approached the spot. That's when he heard it, a weak, muffled whimper coming from beneath the earth. His heart stopped. Dropping his clipboard, Garrett fell to his knees and began clawing at the dirt with his bare hands. "Hold on," he muttered, not even sure what he was digging for. "Just hold on." The shallow grave yielded quickly to his desperate efforts. First he uncovered dark fur, then a nose, and finally, a pair of amber eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. A German shepherd lay buried in the dirt, barely breathing. "Dear God," Garrett whispered, his voice shaking. The dog's chest barely rose with each shallow breath, dirt packed around its body like a cruel coffin. With gentle but urgent movements, Garrett cleared the soil away, speaking softly all the while. "Stay with me, buddy. I've got you." The dog's eyes never left his face, filled with a heart-wrenching mixture of fear and hope. Once freed, the animal tried to stand but collapsed, too weak to support its own weight. "Don't try to move," Garrett said, shrugging off his flannel shirt to wrap around the trembling dog. He lifted the large shepherd as carefully as he could, his arms straining with the effort. The dog whimpered but didn't struggle, seeming to understand Garrett was trying to help. His truck had never seemed so far away. Each step was measured, deliberate, as he carried his precious cargo. "Hang in there," he kept murmuring, more to calm himself than the dog. "We're getting you help." The nearest emergency veterinary clinic was a 15-minute drive, but Garrett made it in 10, running every yellow light along the way. His heart pounded as he burst through the clinic doors, the bell jingling wildly above him. "Please," he called out, his voice rough with emotion, "this dog needs help right now." The staff sprang into action immediately. A team of veterinary technicians rushed forward with a gurney, carefully taking the German shepherd from Garrett's arms. He watched helplessly as they whisked the dog away through swinging doors, leaving him alone in the waiting room with dirt-covered hands and a racing heart. Minutes stretched into hours. Garrett paced the small waiting room, unable to sit still. When the veterinarian finally emerged, her face was serious but hopeful. "He's stabilized," she said, and Garrett felt his knees go weak with relief. "But I have to tell you, this was no accident. The injuries and the way he was buried, someone did this deliberately." Garrett's hands clenched into fists. Who would do something like that? "There's more," the vet continued. "During our examination, we found a microchip." She paused, consulting her clipboard. "The dog is registered to a Patricia Westbrook, wife, or rather widow, of Judge Harold Westbrook." The name hit Garrett like a physical blow. Everyone in Bakersfield knew about Judge Westbrook's recent death. His passing had been front-page news just weeks ago. "I'll need to contact Mrs. Westbrook," the vet said. But Garrett interrupted her. "Wait," he said, pulling out his wallet. "The bills, all of them, they're mine. I want to make sure he gets whatever care he needs." The vet's expression softened. "That's very generous, but—" "Please," Garrett insisted. "I found him. I need to see this through." After a moment, she nodded. "He's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will be crucial." "Then I'm staying," Garrett said firmly, already pulling out his phone to call his crew foreman. "I'll be here all night if I have to." The vet led him back to where the German Shepherd lay connected to various monitors, his breathing now steady and strong. Those remarkable amber eyes opened as Garrett approached, and the dog's tail thumped weakly against the bed. Garrett pulled up a chair and gently placed his hand near the dog's paw, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. "You're safe now, buddy," he whispered, his throat tight with emotion. "I promise you're safe." The dog's paw moved slightly, coming to rest against Garrett's hand, and in that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them, one that would change both their lives forever. The veterinary receptionist's voice trembled slightly as she made the call. "Mrs. Westbrook, this is Valley Emergency Animal Hospital. We have your dog Kaiser here." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When the voice finally came, it was barely a whisper. That's impossible. Kaiser disappeared 3 weeks ago." "Ma'am, we confirmed his identity through his microchip. He's alive, but he's been through a terrible ordeal." 20 minutes later, the clinic's doors burst open. Patricia Westbrook rushed in, her silver-streaked hair wind-blown and her designer clothes slightly disheveled, a stark contrast to her usual polished appearance. Her eyes were wild with hope and fear. Garrett stood up from his chair in the waiting room, immediately recognizing her from newspaper photographs. She looked smaller in person, more vulnerable. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Where's my Kaiser?" The veterinarian led them both to the recovery area. The moment Patricia saw Kaiser, she let out a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. The German Shepherd's tail began to thump weakly against the bed, his amber eyes brightening at the sight of her. "Oh, my sweet boy," Patricia whispered, carefully approaching the bed. She gently touched his head, and Kaiser leaned into her hand, whimpering softly. "I thought I'd lost you too." Garrett watched from the doorway, his heart aching at the reunion. The sophisticated woman he'd expected dissolved completely as Patricia pressed her forehead against Kaiser's, tears streaming down her face. "He wasn't just a pet," she explained later, once Kaiser had fallen into a peaceful sleep. "Harold, my husband, had him specially trained as a protection dog. After Harold died..." She swallowed hard. "Kaiser became my only real companion." Garrett nodded, understanding flowing through him. "The judge passed away 6 months ago, didn't he?" "Yes." Patricia's fingers continued to stroke Kaiser's fur. "Since then, it seems like everyone who comes around either wants something from me or is trying to tell me how to handle my grief." She looked up at Garrett, her eyes swimming with fresh tears. "Then Kaiser disappeared, and I thought..." "We're going to find out what happened," Garrett promised, his voice gentle but firm. "But right now, let's focus on getting him better." The veterinarian explained that Kaiser would need several weeks of recovery time and constant care. Before Patricia could speak, Garrett offered his trailer as a recovery space. "I live alone, work nearby, and can check on him throughout the day," he explained. "Plus, I've got a fenced yard where he can get fresh air once he's stronger." Patricia studied him for a long moment. "You've already done so much. The medical bills alone..." "Weren't even a question," Garrett interrupted softly. "Some things are more important than money." Something shifted in Patricia's expression. Surprise, followed by a warmth that transformed her entire face. Yes, she said quietly. They are. Over the next few weeks, Patricia visited Kaiser daily at Garrett's modest trailer. The first time she pulled up in her luxury car, Garrett felt self-conscious about the peeling paint and worn steps. But Patricia never seemed to notice these things, focusing instead on Kaiser's progress and sharing stories about his adventures with Harold. Garrett found himself looking forward to her visits more and more. There was something refreshing about the way she sat at his small kitchen table, drinking coffee from his mismatched mugs, her laugh genuine and unguarded as she watched Kaiser gain strength day by day. One evening, as they sat on Garrett's small porch watching Kaiser take tentative steps in the yard, Patricia spoke softly. "You know, you're the first person since Harold died who hasn't tried to tell me what to do with my life or my money." Garrett turned to look at her, noting how the sunset painted her silver-streaked hair in shades of gold. "Why would I? Seems to me you're doing just fine making your own choices." Patricia's eyes grew distant. "You'd be surprised how many people think they know better. The social climbers, the financial advisors, the so-called friends who suddenly have investment opportunities." She shook her head. "It gets lonely, trying to figure out who actually cares and who just sees dollar signs." "That sounds rough," Garrett said simply, no judgment or pity in his voice. Just understanding. Patricia's hand found his on the porch railing, and neither of them pulled away. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, watching Kaiser explore the yard with growing confidence. The German shepherd paused to look back at them, his amber eyes bright with life, and something unspoken passed between the unlikely trio, a sense of belonging that transcended social boundaries and spoke directly to the heart. The evening air grew cooler as Patricia and Garrett sat on his porch, watching Kaiser patrol the small yard with increasing strength. The German shepherd moved with more confidence now, though still favoring his right side slightly. Every few minutes, he would pause his rounds to check on Patricia, his amber eyes fixed intently on her. Patricia wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "I've been wanting to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About Harold's death." Garrett turned to face her, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I'm listening." "The official report said it was natural causes. A heart attack." Patricia's eyes followed Kaiser as he made another protective circle of the yard. But something wasn't right. In those last few weeks, Harold was different. "Different how?" Garrett asked gently. Patricia's fingers twisted in her lap. "He kept talking about family betrayal. He'd spend hours in his study going through papers. He told me he needed to make important changes to his will, but he never said exactly what changes." She took a shaky breath. "And Kaiser wouldn't leave his side." As if hearing his name, Kaiser trotted over to the porch steps, positioning himself directly in front of Patricia. His posture was alert, protective. "He was like this back then too," Patricia continued, reaching down to stroke Kaiser's head. "Following Harold everywhere, even to the bathroom. Sometimes he would stand at the study door and growl, but when we checked, there was never anyone there." Garrett leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Dogs can sense things we can't." "That's what makes me wonder." Patricia's voice caught. "The night Harold died, Kaiser was with him in the study. The next morning, when I found Harold..." She pressed a hand to her mouth, collecting herself. "Kaiser was gone. Just vanished. The police said he must have run away, but Kaiser would never leave us." Kaiser whined softly, pressing closer to Patricia's legs. His behavior had been changing as his strength returned, becoming more vigilant, more protective of Patricia. Sometimes he would freeze, staring at certain objects or doorways with an intensity that seemed almost human. "Yesterday," Patricia said, "I was going through some of Harold's old papers, and Kaiser started acting strangely. He kept pawing at an old photo of Harold and his stepson Clayton, then running to the door, then back to me. It was like he was trying to tell me something. Garrett straightened, his construction-weathered hands gripping the porch railing. You think Kaiser witnessed what happened that night? I think... Patricia's voice dropped even lower. I think that's why someone tried to kill him. He was the only one there, the only one who knows the truth. Kaiser's head snapped up suddenly, his ears forward. He let out a low growl, moving to stand between Patricia and the darkening yard. He's been doing that more often too, Patricia said, watching Kaiser's protective display. Especially when I mention Clayton or the will. It's like he's trying to warn me about something. Garrett studied Kaiser's alert posture, the intelligent awareness in those amber eyes. Protection dogs are specially trained to observe and react to threats. If Kaiser was with your husband that night, then he saw everything, Patricia finished. And someone knows that? Her hand trembled as she reached for Garrett's arm. The timing of it all, Harold's concerns about betrayal, his plans to change the will, Kaiser's disappearance, and then someone trying to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Kaiser moved closer, resting his head on Patricia's knee. His eyes never stopped scanning the yard, his body tense and ready. The question is, Garrett said carefully, who would benefit from your husband's death? And who would have known Kaiser was a witness? Patricia's fingers tightened on Garrett's arm. Only family knew Kaiser's training, knew how much he saw and understood. And the estate. She swallowed hard. Half goes to me, half to Clayton. But Harold was worried about something in the finances. He kept saying he needed to protect the family legacy. Kaiser's head lifted at Clayton's name, a low rumble building in his chest. His amber eyes fixed on Patricia with an almost desperate intensity, as if willing her to understand something crucial. I think, Patricia whispered, Kaiser is trying to tell us who's responsible, but someone already tried to silence him once. What if they try again? Garrett covered her hand with his own, his calloused fingers warm and reassuring. That's not going to happen. We'll figure this out together, and we'll keep both of you safe. Kaiser moved to press against both of them, his powerful body forming a protective barrier between them and the gathering darkness. In the growing shadows of evening, the three of them sat close together, an unlikely trio bound by circumstance and growing trust, each sensing that they were on the verge of uncovering a truth that someone had tried very hard to bury. Clayton Westbrook's hands trembled as he set down his morning coffee. The newspaper article was small, tucked away in the local section, but its implications were enormous. Local builder saves buried dog, returns pet to widow. His carefully manicured nails dug into the paper as he read about Kaiser's miraculous survival. This can't be happening, he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. The dog was supposed to be dead, buried at that construction site where no one would ever find him. But now Kaiser was alive, the only witness to what really happened the night Judge Westbrook died. Clayton paced his luxurious office, his expensive shoes clicking against hardwood floors. He had to see for himself, had to assess the threat. Grabbing his keys, he drove his Mercedes to Patricia's estate, rehearsing his concerned stepson act. Patricia answered the door with Kaiser at her side. The German Shepherd's reaction was immediate and fierce, hackles raised, teeth bared, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. "Kaiser, quiet," Patricia commanded, though she made no move to restrain him. "Clayton, what a surprise." "I just read about Kaiser in the paper," Clayton said, keeping his distance from the dog while maintaining his practiced smile. "I had to come see for myself. It's a miracle he's alive." "Yes, thanks to Garrett Holloway." Patricia gestured to the construction foreman who had appeared in the hallway behind her. Clayton noted the way the man stood protectively close to his stepmother, his weathered hands capable and strong. "How fortunate," Clayton managed, studying the unlikely pair. This was an unexpected complication. "And you're sure he's the same Kaiser?" after all this time? Kaiser's growl deepened, his amber eyes locked on Clayton with unmistakable recognition and hostility. "He's the same," Patricia said firmly. "The microchip confirmed it. Would you like to come in for coffee?" Clayton stepped into the familiar foyer, noting how Kaiser positioned himself between him and Patricia. The dog's behavior was too deliberate, too knowing. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. This was a trained protection dog who remembered exactly what he had witnessed. "You're looking well, Patricia," Clayton said smoothly. "I've been worried about you, all alone in this big house since Father's passing." "She's not alone," Garrett spoke up, his quiet voice carrying unexpected authority. "Kaiser and I are making sure of that." Clayton's smile tightened. "How protective of you, Mr. Holloway. I wasn't aware my stepmother needed a bodyguard." "Sometimes people need protection without knowing they're in danger," Garrett replied evenly. The implied threat wasn't lost on Clayton. Making his excuses, he left quickly, his composed facade cracking as soon as he reached his car. He pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. Later that evening, Clayton sat in a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town. Detective Ray Morrison slid into the booth across from him, his weathered face showing the strain of years of corruption. "This better be important," Morrison growled, signaling for a drink. "I'm risking a lot meeting you in public." "Kaiser's alive," Clayton said without preamble. "That mutt you swore would never be found is not only alive but back with Patricia, and there's some construction worker involved now too." Morrison's face darkened. "Impossible. I watched you bury that dog myself." "Well, someone dug him up. And now he's with Patricia, acting like a four-legged accusation. Every time that dog looks at me, I can see he remembers everything." Clayton leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If Patricia starts asking too many questions about Father's death, your medical examiner's report ruling it natural causes won't hold up under scrutiny." "Calm down," Morrison hissed. "Dogs can't talk, and without evidence, it's just the paranoid suspicions of a grieving widow." "You don't understand. Kaiser was specially trained. Father made sure that dog could communicate through signals and behaviors, and now he's got Patricia and this Garrett Holloway watching his every move like he's trying to tell them something." Morrison took a long drink, considering. "So, what do you want me to do about it?" "We need to separate them. Get the dog away from Patricia and her new friend. Make it look official. Something about dangerous animal complaints or health code violations. Anything to get Kaiser isolated where we can finish what we started." The detective studied Clayton's desperate face. "That'll cost you, more than our usual arrangement." "Whatever it takes," Clayton said. "Half of Father's estate is worth millions, but only if no one starts digging into his death or the missing money. Kaiser is a threat we can't afford to ignore." Morrison nodded slowly. "I'll start working on the paperwork. But Clayton?" He fixed the younger man with a hard stare. "If this goes wrong, I was never involved. You understand?" "Perfectly." Clayton pulled out an envelope thick with cash. "Consider this a down payment." As they parted ways, Clayton felt the weight of his stepfather's death pressing down on him. He had worked too hard, planned too carefully, to let a dog and a construction worker ruin everything now. One way or another, Kaiser's second chance at life would be his last. Patricia stood in her husband's study, watching Kaiser pace restlessly in front of the mahogany bookshelves. The German Shepherd's behavior had grown increasingly agitated since they'd entered the room, his amber eyes fixed on a specific section of books. "He's trying to tell us something," Garrett said softly, moving closer to the shelves. Kaiser's tail wagged in response, and he pawed at the lower section of the bookcase. Patricia ran her fingers along the spines of leather-bound law books, memories of Harold working late into the night flooding back. This was where he spent his final weeks, barely leaving except to sleep. He said he was working on something important. Kaiser barked sharply, drawing their attention to where he was scratching at the base of the shelf. Garrett knelt down, running his weathered hands along the woodwork. "There's something odd about this panel," he murmured. "The grain doesn't match exactly." Patricia joined him on the floor, not caring about her expensive slacks. Harold was always paranoid about keeping important documents safe. He had hiding places all over the house. Garrett pressed different spots along the panel until they heard a soft click. A small compartment popped open, revealing a stack of papers and a leather-bound notebook. "Oh my God!" Patricia whispered, hands trembling as she pulled out the documents. Kaiser sat beside her, his posture alert and protective. Garrett moved closer, providing steady support as Patricia began reading through the papers. Her face grew pale. "These are financial records," she said. "Bank statements, transfer receipts, notes in Harold's handwriting. Clayton has been stealing from the estate for years." "How much?" Garrett asked quietly. "Millions." Patricia's voice shook with anger. "Harold discovered the embezzlement just weeks before he died. Look at this." She handed Garrett a handwritten page from the judge's notebook. Garrett read aloud. "Clayton confronted me today about the audit. His reaction confirms my suspicions. The threats were veiled but clear. Must protect Patricia's interests. Meeting with lawyers tomorrow to change will and file charges." Kaiser whined softly, pressing against Patricia's side. She stroked his head, tears forming in her eyes. The meeting never happened. Harold died that night. More papers revealed a detailed trail of Clayton's theft, falsified documents, unauthorized transfers, and manipulated accounts going back 5 years. Judge Westbrook had meticulously documented everything, building an airtight case against his stepson. "Here's the draft of the new will," Patricia said, pulling out a legal document. Harold was planning to disinherit Clayton completely. He wrote that no son of his, step or otherwise, would steal from his family and threaten violence when discovered. Garrett's expression hardened as he read through more of the judge's notes. These last entries, Harold knew he was in danger. He wrote about Clayton's increasingly erratic behavior, the verbal threats, even suspicious people watching the house. Kaiser grew more animated as they discussed the documents, moving between them and the door as if urging them to action. "The dog knows," Garrett said, watching Kaiser's behavior. "He was with your husband that night. He witnessed everything, which is why Clayton tried to kill him." Patricia gathered the papers with shaking hands. "We have to take these to the authorities. This is evidence of both embezzlement and—" She swallowed hard. "And murder." "Not to the local police," Garrett cautioned. "Remember what you told me about Detective Morrison's suspicious behavior during the investigation. We need to go higher up. State Police or FBI." "You're right." Patricia quickly sorted through the documents, organizing them into a manila envelope. "Clayton has too many connections in local law enforcement. We can't trust them." Kaiser's ears suddenly perked up, and he moved to the study door, his posture tense. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. "We need to leave now," Garrett whispered, taking the envelope and helping Patricia to her feet. "We're not safe here anymore." Patricia nodded, her face set with determination. "There's a back staircase through my bedroom. We can get to the garage without being seen from the front of the house." Kaiser took point, leading them silently through the darkened hallways of the estate. The dog's training was evident in every calculated move, every alert pause to check their surroundings. As they moved through the house, Patricia felt a strange mix of grief and validation. Her instincts about Harold's death had been right all along. Now they had proof that would destroy Clayton and bring justice for her husband's murder. Garrett's strong hand found hers in the darkness, offering silent support. Despite the danger they were in, Patricia felt safer than she had in months. With Kaiser's protective presence and Garrett's unwavering loyalty, she finally had allies she could trust in her fight for the truth. They reached her car without incident, the envelope of damning evidence secured inside Garrett's jacket. As they pulled away from the estate, Patricia watched Kaiser in the rearview mirror, his alert gaze scanning for threats. The dog had led them to the truth, just as he had protected Harold until the very end. Red and blue lights flashed in Patricia's rearview mirror as she drove down the empty county road. Her heart sank as she recognized Detective Morrison's patrol car behind them. "This isn't good," Garrett said from the passenger seat, his hand instinctively moving to protect the envelope of evidence inside his jacket. Kaiser sat up in the back seat, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Patricia pulled over, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "What do we do?" "Stay calm," Garrett whispered. "Let me handle this." Detective Morrison approached, his flashlight beam sweeping across their faces. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you." His tone left no room for argument. As they complied, Morrison's gaze lingered on Kaiser, who watched intently from inside the car. "Routine traffic stop," the detective said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You were weaving a bit back there, Mrs. Westbrook." "That's not true," Patricia started to protest, but Garrett touched her arm gently. "I'm going to need to search the vehicles," Morrison announced, "both the car and Mr. Holloway's truck." He gestured to where Garrett's work truck was parked just ahead. They'd stopped there briefly to switch some supplies before heading to the estate. "You don't have probable cause," Garrett said firmly. Morrison's smile turned predatory. "Actually, I received an anonymous tip about drug trafficking. That gives me all the cause I need." He keyed his radio, bringing in backup for a vehicle search. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived. Kaiser began barking frantically as the officers approached Garrett's truck with flashlights. "Well, well," Morrison called out after a few minutes of searching. "Look what we have here." He emerged from the truck cab holding a small plastic bag of white powder. "That's not mine," Garrett said immediately, his face hardening with anger. "You planted that." "Search him," Morrison ordered his officers. They roughly patted Garrett down, making him drop the envelope of evidence. Morrison snatched it up before Patricia could reach it. "What's this?" he asked, peeking inside. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the contents. "Looks like we'll need to add theft of private documents to the charges." "Those belong to me," Patricia protested. "They're from my husband's estate." Morrison ignored her, nodding to his officers. "Cuff him. Mr. Holloway, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." Patricia watched helplessly as they handcuffed Garrett. Kaiser was going wild in the car, throwing himself against the window. "Stay with Kaiser," Garrett called to her as they led him away. "Don't let them separate you." Morrison approached Patricia, handing her a ticket. "For the traffic violation," he said smoothly. "I suggest you get home, Mrs. Westbrook. It's not safe to be out so late." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Patricia stood rooted to the spot as they drove away with Garrett, the envelope of evidence now in Morrison's possession. Her hands trembled as she got back in the car with Kaiser, who whined and pressed his nose against the window where Garrett had disappeared. The next morning, Patricia sat in her lawyer's office, arranging bail for Garrett. "The charges are completely fabricated," she insisted. "Detective Morrison planted those drugs. He's working with Clayton." Her lawyer, an elderly man who'd worked with Judge Westbrook for decades, looked troubled. "The corruption in the department runs deep, Patricia. Morrison's been under investigation before, but nothing ever sticks. He's got powerful friends." "Just get Garrett out," she said firmly, writing a check for the bail amount. "He's innocent." Hours later, Garrett walked out of the county jail, his face tight with anger and exhaustion. Patricia waited in her car with Kaiser, who nearly knocked Garrett over in his excitement to see him. "They're watching every move we make now," Garrett said as he slid into the passenger seat. "Morrison made that clear during processing. He kept asking about what we found in the study." "Clayton must be desperate," Patricia said. "He knows Kaiser led us to the evidence. Even though Morrison has the documents now, he knows we've seen them. We know the truth." "Which makes us both targets," Garrett added grimly. "He won't stop until he's eliminated everyone who threatens his inheritance." Patricia drove carefully, watching for any signs of being followed. What do we do now? We can't trust the local police, and Clayton has connections everywhere. We need help from outside, Garrett said. State police, FBI, someone beyond Clayton's influence, but we have to be careful. One wrong move and we'll end up worse than framed. Kaiser sat alert in the back seat, his amber eyes scanning the road. The dog's protective instincts seemed to be in overdrive, as if he sensed the growing danger around them. Meanwhile, across town, Clayton Westbrook sat in his study, speaking quietly on the phone. Morrison did his part, but it's not enough. They know too much. He paused, listening. No, I'll handle my stepmother personally. The dog, too. It's time to finish this properly. He hung up and opened his desk drawer, removing a small key. Everything he'd worked for was at risk. Patricia and her loyal guard dog had to be eliminated, and that meddling contractor needed to disappear. Clayton had built his scheme too carefully to let it fall apart now. One final move would solve all his problems permanently. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck midnight as Clayton slipped through the French doors he'd carefully jimmied open. Moonlight filtered through the estate's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. He moved with practiced stealth, knowing every creaky floorboard from his years living here. Upstairs, Kaiser's ears perked up. The German shepherd lifted his head from his bed near Patricia's door, his amber eyes focusing in the darkness. A low growl rumbled in his chest as unfamiliar footsteps echoed from below. Patricia stirred at the sound of Kaiser's warning. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, reaching for her bedside lamp. Before she could turn it on, Kaiser's growl deepened into aggressive barking that echoed through the house. "Quiet that dog!" Clayton's voice rang out from the hallway, all pretense of stealth abandoned. Patricia's blood ran cold. She grabbed her cell phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911 as Kaiser positioned himself between her and the door, his hackles raised. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's broken into my house, Patricia whispered urgently. 312 Oakwood Drive. Please, hurry! The bedroom door burst open. Clayton stood there, his usually composed features twisted with desperation. Patricia dropped the phone, but left the line open as she backed away. "Run!" she commanded Kaiser, but the loyal dog held his ground, snarling at Clayton. Patricia darted past them both, racing toward her husband's study. She could hear Clayton pursuing her, Kaiser's barks mixing with the sound of their footsteps. She slammed the study door behind her, frantically searching for anything she could use as a weapon. "It's over, Patricia," Clayton called through the door. "You should have left well enough alone. The estate was fine until you and that contractor started digging around." "You killed your own father!" Patricia shouted back, her voice shaking. "Kaiser saw everything, didn't he? That's why you tried to bury him alive." The door flew open. Clayton stepped in, breathing heavily, with Kaiser snapping at his heels. He kicked out at the dog, who dodged the blow but maintained his aggressive stance. "Dad was going to ruin everything," Clayton snarled, pulling a handgun from his jacket. 20 years I spent carefully siphoning money from the estate accounts. He never noticed until that last month. Suddenly he's reviewing all the books, talking about changing his will. He gestured with the gun. I couldn't let that happen. Patricia's back pressed against her husband's desk. "So you murdered him, made it look like natural causes." "It was perfect," Clayton said, his eyes wild. "Until that damn dog wouldn't leave his side. Kaiser knew something was wrong. He wouldn't let anyone near Dad's body. Morrison helped me declare it natural causes, but Kaiser..." He shook his head. "The dog had to go. Should have made sure he was dead the first time." Kaiser's barking grew more intense, and Clayton swung the gun toward him. "Shut up. One bullet for the dog, one for you, Patricia. They'll find your bodies in the morning. Poor widow, killed by an intruder. Such a tragedy." "You won't get away with this," Patricia said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her terror. "I already have," Clayton sneered. "Morrison has the evidence you found. No one will ever believe..." The sound of the front door crashing open downstairs cut him off. "Patricia!" Garrett's voice echoed through the house. Clayton's face contorted with rage. Your knight in shining armor? Perfect. 3 witnesses to eliminate instead of 2. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Clayton raised the gun, aiming it at Patricia's heart. Kaiser launched himself forward with a fierce growl, but Clayton had anticipated the move. His finger tightened on the trigger. Patricia! Garrett appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with horror. Don't move! Clayton shouted, swinging the gun between his 3 targets. 1 step and I'll shoot her first. The room crackled with tension. Patricia could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Her earlier 911 call had gotten through. Clayton heard them too, his composed mask cracking completely as he realized his carefully constructed plan was falling apart. It's over, Clayton, Garrett said firmly, edging into the room. Put the gun down. Nothing's over, Clayton spat, his hand shaking as he kept the gun trained on Patricia. I won't lose everything. Not to her, not to that mangy dog, and certainly not to some working-class nobody. Kaiser's growl deepened, his muscles coiled and ready to spring. The sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights began to flash through the study windows. Clayton's eyes darted between his 3 targets, his finger white-knuckled on the trigger as sweat beaded on his forehead. Last chance, he snarled, settling his aim on Patricia. Say goodbye to your precious widow. The tension in Judge Westbrook's study reached its breaking point. Clayton's finger trembled on the trigger as he kept the gun trained on Patricia, his face twisted with desperate rage. I said goodbye, Clayton shouted, squeezing the trigger. In that split second, Kaiser launched himself through the air with a ferocious snarl. His powerful jaws clamped down on Clayton's gun arm, throwing off his aim. The bullet shattered a nearby window instead of finding its intended target. Garrett lunged forward to protect Patricia, but Clayton managed to wrench his arm free from Kaiser's grip. He swung the gun wildly, firing again. This time the bullet found flesh, tearing through Garrett's shoulder. Garrett stumbled backward with a cry of pain, clutching his wound as blood seeped between his fingers. Garrett! Patricia screamed, rushing to his side. The study door burst open again. Detective Morrison charged in, his service weapon drawn. Clayton! What's happening here? Morrison. Clayton's eyes lit up with desperate relief. Perfect timing. Help me finish this. But Morrison hesitated, taking in the scene. Garrett bleeding on the floor, Patricia kneeling beside him, Kaiser standing guard with bloodied fangs bared. The approaching sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights strobed through the broken window. You said this would be clean, Morrison hissed. This is a mess. They'll investigate now. They'll find everything. Clayton's laugh held an edge of hysteria. Then we'll have to eliminate all the witnesses, won't we? Starting with you. Morrison's eyes widened as Clayton swung the gun toward him. You double-crossing snake! Did you really think I'd leave any loose ends? Clayton sneered. A corrupt cop who helped cover up murder? You're as much a liability as they are. Kaiser seized the moment of distraction, launching another attack. His powerful body slammed into Clayton's legs, throwing him off balance. The gun went off again, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as Clayton stumbled backward. Morrison raised his weapon, but now he aimed at Clayton. Drop it, Westbrook. It's over. Nothing's over. Clayton kicked Kaiser away and dove through the broken window onto the second-floor balcony. Kaiser followed without hesitation, ignoring his previous injuries in his determination to protect his family. Patricia helped Garrett to his feet, supporting him as they moved to the window. Outside, Clayton was scrambling down the ornate trellis, Kaiser in close pursuit. The German shepherd's powerful legs carried him over the balcony rail and down to the ground with athletic grace. He's heading for the ravine! Patricia gasped, recognizing Clayton's desperate route of escape. More police cars screamed up the long driveway, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. Clayton sprinted across the manicured lawn toward the tree line, but Kaiser was closing the gap. The dog's amber eyes gleamed with determination as he chased the man who had tried to kill him, who had murdered his beloved master. Morrison hurried down the stairs to coordinate with the arriving officers, leaving Patricia to help Garrett. She pressed a cloth against his wounded shoulder, her hands shaking. "I'm okay," Garrett assured her through gritted teeth. "Just a flesh wound. But Kaiser ... He won't let Clayton escape," Patricia said with certainty. "Not this time." They watched through the broken window as Clayton disappeared into the darkness beyond the estate's grounds, Kaiser's powerful form following like an avenging shadow. The steep ravine lay just beyond the trees, a treacherous drop that had always required careful fencing to prevent accidents. Shouts echoed from below as officers began to secure the scene. Morrison's voice carried up to them, directing the police to spread out and search the grounds. But Patricia knew it would be Kaiser, not the police, who would bring Clayton to justice. "Kaiser will find him," Garrett said softly, echoing her thoughts. "He won't let Clayton hurt anyone else." Patricia nodded, holding Garrett close while being careful of his injury. The sound of Kaiser's determined barking carried back to them through the darkness, growing more distant as predator became prey and justice pursued the guilty into the night. More sirens approached. Ambulances this time, their wailing growing louder as they raced up the long driveway. Patricia could hear officers entering the house, securing rooms, their radios crackling with updates. But her attention remained fixed on the darkness beyond the estate's lights, where somewhere in the shadows, a loyal dog pursued the man who had destroyed so many lives. The night air carried the echo of Kaiser's barking, mixed now with Clayton's shouts of fear as he fled toward the ravine. Patricia held her breath, listening to the sounds of pursuit fade into the darkness, knowing that this night would finally bring an end to the nightmare that had begun with her husband's murder. "Be careful, Kaiser," she whispered into the night. "Come back to us." The sound of Kaiser's barking echoed through the darkness as Clayton stumbled through the trees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The beam of police flashlights swept across the grounds behind him, getting closer with each passing second. Panic drove him forward, deeper into the shadows beyond the estate's manicured lawns. Kaiser's powerful form emerged from the darkness ahead, cutting off Clayton's escape route. The German Shepherd's amber eyes glowed with fierce determination as he advanced, forcing Clayton to backpedal towards the ravine's edge. "Get back!" Clayton swung his gun wildly, but Kaiser held his ground, teeth bared in a threatening snarl. The rocky slope loomed behind Clayton, invisible in the darkness. His heel caught on loose gravel, and suddenly the ground disappeared beneath him. A terrified scream tore from his throat as he pitched backward, tumbling down the steep incline. Rocks and branches tore at his clothes as he rolled helplessly down the ravine. The gun flew from his grip, disappearing into the shadows. His body slammed against outcroppings of stone until a final impact left him sprawled at the bottom, a white-hot burst of pain shooting through his spine. Clayton tried to move his legs, but nothing happened. Terror gripped him as he realized he couldn't feel anything below his waist. "Help!" he screamed into the darkness. "Somebody help me!" Kaiser's silhouette appeared at the top of the ravine, his bark alerting the approaching officers to their location. Flashlight beams converged on Clayton's broken form as police carefully made their way down the treacherous slope. Back at the estate, paramedics worked quickly to treat Garrett's gunshot wound. Patricia held his hand while they cleaned and bandaged his shoulder, her face etched with concern. "The bullet went clean through," one paramedic assured them. "He'll need stitches at the hospital, but there's no serious damage." Patricia squeezed Garrett's hand. "Thank God you're all right." Detective Morrison sat in the back of a police car, his head bowed in defeat as officers read him his rights. The corrupt detective had already started talking, eager to make a deal. His confession would expose the entire network of corruption that had protected Clayton's crimes. Emergency crews brought Clayton up from the ravine on a backboard, his neck immobilized in a collar. The doctor's initial assessment confirmed what Clayton already knew. The fall had severely injured his spine. He would never walk again. As Clayton was loaded into an ambulance, he locked eyes with Patricia. All his arrogance had drained away, replaced by the hollow stare of a broken man who had lost everything. Patricia turned away from him, focusing instead on Kaiser, who had returned to her side. The loyal German shepherd was favoring his left front leg, and fresh cuts marked his muzzle from the fight with Clayton. Patricia knelt beside him, gently examining his injuries while he nuzzled her hand. "Let's get him checked out too," Garrett suggested from his place on the stretcher. "He's earned some proper care after everything he's been through." In the days that followed, the full truth about Judge Westbrook's murder finally came to light. Morrison's confession revealed how Clayton had poisoned his stepfather after the judge discovered his years of embezzlement. The detective had helped cover up the crime, ruling it natural causes in exchange for substantial bribes. Kaiser had witnessed the murder, which explained his aggressive behavior toward Clayton afterward. When Clayton realized the dog could somehow communicate what he'd seen, he had tried to eliminate the only living witness by burying him alive at the construction site. The investigation expanded, uncovering more corrupt officials who had enabled Clayton's crimes. One by one, the conspirators were arrested, their network of corruption crumbling like a house of cards. Patricia visited Garrett daily during his recovery, their bond growing stronger as they helped each other heal from the trauma they'd shared. Kaiser stayed close to both of them, his protective instincts now extending to include Garrett as part of his family. "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing everything," Patricia said one afternoon, watching Kaiser doze at their feet. His injuries had healed quickly, leaving only small scars hidden beneath his fur. "But we didn't," Garrett replied, taking her hand. "Thanks to Kaiser, the truth came out. Justice was served." Patricia nodded, grateful for the second chance they'd all been given. Clayton and Morrison would spend years in prison for their crimes. Judge Westbrook's murder had been solved, and his killer brought to justice. The healing process would take time, but they would face it together. Kaiser lifted his head, looking up at them with those soulful amber eyes that had first captured Garrett's heart in that shallow grave. He had protected his family, exposed the truth, and brought down those who had hurt the people he loved. Now he could finally rest, knowing his mission was complete. The estate grounds were peaceful in the afternoon sun, with no trace of the violence that had erupted there. New glass had replaced the broken window in the study, and fresh flowers bloomed in the gardens. The ravine where Clayton had fallen was now properly fenced off, ensuring no one else would suffer the same fate. Patricia, Garrett, and Kaiser sat together on the terrace, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. They had survived the darkness and emerged stronger, bound together by love, loyalty, and the unshakable truth that had finally come to light. 6 months passed like a gentle breeze, washing away the darkness of the past. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the wraparound porch of the renovated farmhouse, where Kaiser lounged contentedly in a patch of warmth. The property stretched out before him, 10 acres of rolling meadows and mature trees that Garrett had transformed into their perfect home. Patricia stood in the kitchen, watching through wide windows as Garrett checked on the garden's spring plantings. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the life they'd built together. The old estate, with its shadows and painful memories, had been sold months ago. This new home, crafted by Garrett's skilled hands, represented everything they'd found in each other: warmth, authenticity, and healing. Garrett's construction company had flourished, thanks in part to Patricia's business connections. But more importantly, their love had helped each other heal. Patricia had emerged from her grief and isolation, while Garrett had finally found the genuine partnership he'd yearned for after his divorce. The wedding preparations buzzed with activity as their closest friends decorated the backyard. Simple white chairs lined the garden path, and delicate flower arrangements adorned every surface. Patricia had insisted on a small, intimate ceremony. No social pretenses, just honest celebration with the people they truly cared about. Kaiser watched the preparations with keen interest, particularly focused on the small velvet pillow that would hold the rings. They had practiced his role as ring bearer countless times, and his proud bearing showed he understood the importance of his duty. As Patricia slipped into her elegant cream-colored dress, She heard the happy barking of puppies from the side yard. Through the window, she could see Kaiser's 4-month-old pups tumbling over each other in play. Their mother, a beautiful German shepherd from a local family, dozed nearby, keeping one eye on her energetic offspring. The sight of new life springing from survival brought tears to Patricia's eyes. Like those puppies, love had grown from the most unexpected circumstances, transforming tragedy into blessing. The ceremony began as the afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows across the garden. Patricia walked down the flower-lined path on her own, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. Garrett waited for her beneath an arch of climbing roses, his eyes shining with joy and wonder. Kaiser padded solemnly between them, the ring pillow balanced perfectly in his mouth. His amber eyes held the same dignified expression he'd worn when serving Judge Westbrook, but now that loyalty belonged to both Patricia and Garrett. He delivered the rings without hesitation, then sat regally beside them as they exchanged their vows. "You found me when I was lost," Patricia said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Not just that day with Kaiser, but every day since. You showed me what real love looks like, honest, brave, and true." Garrett's weathered hands trembled slightly as he placed the ring on her finger. "You and Kaiser gave me a purpose bigger than myself. You taught me that sometimes the most precious things in life come disguised as challenges. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of the love you've given me." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Kaiser's deep bark of approval brought laughter from their gathered friends. The puppies joined in from their enclosure, creating a joyful chorus that celebrated the moment. The reception was as understated as the ceremony, with tables scattered across the lawn and twinkling lights strung between the trees. Kaiser moved between the guests, accepting treats and attention while keeping a protective eye on his family. The puppies were released to join the party, bringing chaos and delight as they romped through the gathering. Later that evening, as the stars began to appear, Patricia and Garrett sat together on their porch swing. Kaiser lay at their feet, while his puppies played in the yard below. The sound of their youthful energy filled the cooling air. "I never imagined this kind of happiness was possible," Patricia said, leaning against Garrett's shoulder. "Not after everything that happened." Garrett wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best ones. If I hadn't found Kaiser that morning, if he hadn't been so brave and loyal, if you hadn't trusted your instincts about the truth." They didn't need to finish the thoughts. Every step of their journey, from Kaiser's rescue to Clayton's arrest, from Morrison's confession to the building of their new home, had led them here. Together, they had transformed survival into triumph, loneliness into family, and justice into peace. The garden below them was beginning to flourish, new growth pushing through rich soil. Like the love that had brought them together, it was a testament to the power of nurturing something precious, of believing in new beginnings, and of finding strength in unexpected connections forged through adversity. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.